Right, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to the Yorkshire Scrutiny Board. Just to say, Tim's put his apologies in, so I'll be chairing today's meeting. Have we received apologies from anybody else with substitutes?
Yes, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Kidd and Councillor Kitching. We've also got Councillors Hunt and Otten here as reserves today.
Right, any urgent items? Not received any urgent items? No urgent items. Item 3, considering the absence of the public or press, I don't think there's none to be on the thing. Item 4, declaration of interest by members. No declarations of interest by members. Item 5, reports from questions and by members. No member got any questions? Item 6, questions from the members of public or press. We've not received any. Agenda item 7, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of July, review of action and logs. Sarah, you're going to just take us through this?
Yep, so we've got some updates from officers across the organisation which didn't quite make it into the publication of the pack. So on in the action log, minute number 212, which was around the walking, wheeling, cycling strategy, we've got a few updates since received, which is in response to the query around pavement parking and use of e-bikes and scooters and theft of them. These are national issues and as such require a national response. At Cllr, during the development of the walking, wheeling, cycling strategy, we've undertaken some initial research to explore specific issues related to active travel across the region, including pavement parking and use of e-bikes and scooters. All 4 local authorities have been involved in that piece of research. Whilst not policy positions, they do provide a bit of an evidence-based, national or regional legal framework and best practice examples for each local authority area. There's quite a lot of text, but this can be shared if wanted. So I guess there's an ask if councillors want all of that detail. It sounds like it's also sort of been covered in the walking, wheeling, cycling strategy, which was published in MCA board papers yesterday. Members get notification of those papers when they're published into your emails as well. A further point, e-scooters are increasingly popular way to get about, but they're not currently allowed either on public roads or pavements. So depending on the outcome of the current government consultation and limited government trial, we'll need to ensure that their needs are thought about on road, pavement and cycle infrastructure. Additionally, many of the local authorities are progressing secure cycle parking facilities in their own town centres so that cycle owners can leave their bikes in a safe and secure environment. On cycle lane usage, we collect pre- and post-implementation data as part of scheme delivery, which shows there is an increase in use of cycle lanes. Particularly successful case study was in Doncaster, which showed a 108% increase in use of cycle lanes by cyclists. And then I've just got another update on a different action, which is on minute number 215, which was around the policy of junk food bans, advertising on public transport in South Yorkshire. I've just had confirmation from the team that there is a policy in place to not have fast food advertised, junk food advertised on the network, but at the moment that doesn't cover the broader issues that were covered. I think it was by yourself, Councillor Argenzio. The other topics at the moment, the policy is around specifically junk food.
My question was about adding on to
Any other questions or comments on that?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, use your mic please.
Thanks. I was just wondering, this is the first time that I see the minutes properly as someone who's attended the meeting, and I was wondering whether it would be possible to actually have who's asked what questions in the record rather than say members, because as politicians sometimes we ask questions on behalf of other people, and it would be also, you know, historically, if we go back to these minutes in 2 years' time, who's going to remember that I asked that particular question? So as a record, I was wondering whether that would be possible in the future.
Yep, we can take that on board. Yep.
Right, okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Bacon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wondered if there's any update on minute number 147.
So the update that we've got for that one is as written in the pack, that there's further work being undertaken by the teams and options considered. That's what we've got.
Happy at that, Councillor Bacon?
Yeah.
Thank you. Move on then. Which item am I on now? 8. Reviewed the latest forward plan key decisions. Any questions or comments on this? Councillor Bacon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The Brownfield Housing Fund. I'm interested in that, and I'm interested in quite a few things on this agenda. Actually, quite a few of them are going to the next board meeting. I just wondered if, for some of these, if I name them, if we can get like briefing papers on them, just like an overview on them, if that's possible. So one of them was the Brownfield Housing Fund. The other one was the award of contract for producing concession cards. So be quite interested to know there what sort of work has been done around trying to encourage people to use their mobile phones and stuff like that. Obviously there's a cohort of people who can't do that, but be quite interested to look at that. And then also the real-time detection priority, and I just wondered if that included live bus signs as well. And then if members of individual authorities will be notified if that does include live bus signs, or if it's just the technology behind that. So if that includes live bus sign, will members of the two authorities mentioned there be notified so they can sort of contribute their ideas?
Anybody can respond to that?
Yep, we'll make that request of the services.
Any more comments of yeah?
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 6, the gain share may come up later. Approval for funding for South Yorkshire Airport City on the 9th of September. Is that 9th of September date still one we're expecting to meet? Okay, thank you.
Right. So there's no more questions on forward plan. Can we agree with that? Item 9 then, committee's work plan.
Yep, so members, just after your last committee meeting on the 22nd of July, we had quite a kind of concise exercise of collecting feedback on possible topics for a work plan for the coming year. So there's a summary of the work and introduction to roles and organisations for the new year in the document in your pack. And then on page 41 of the pack is a summary, a draft summary of the topics that were collated as part of that exercise. So since producing that alongside committee members, we've taken that forward across the organisation with officers of the MCA, and we've had good feedback on the topics. We've had good feedback on engagement with the committee in the past few years, in particular increase in informal engagement, online briefings and workshops, and encouragement to proceed with that. You'll see notes in the report around kind of ways of working and discussion that members have had around keenness to get involved in those kind of more informal and project style scrutiny ways of working, but also an awareness that members' time is limited and that we need to match work streams to that accordingly. This is all just draft. We've built lots of time in your agenda today, so we also have lots of time to unpick this. Feedback, additions, questions, please do bring them forward. In terms of progressing the topics that you can see on page 41, we're currently in the process of moving forward to book in those informal workshops, engagement on specifically bus reform and what the next steps of implementation look like. And we've got a bus franchising item on your agenda later on today. also looking to book in engagement sessions on our engagement framework. That is our kind of strategy that's being drafted around how we work externally with stakeholders in the region, and then also around the integrated settlement and outcomes framework and development of that and involving members in that. So we're beginning to progress all of that with you, and encourage your responses to give us your availability for those sessions, and happy to take any and all feedback.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Bacon?
Yeah, I'll just start off with a question. The papers behind the reports at the background, on 8.1 it talked about the internal budget settlement and how there's been additional resource into the governance team. I just wondered if it was helpful if, at least myself, I don't know if the other committee members want to, but just some background on that, on where that is now, what that figure is and how much it increased by.
So I don't have the exact figures in front of me, Councillor, but this was the request for an additional post to support the work of the Democratic Services team. So it's one additional person within that team to support the work.
Okay, additional resource to be sounded a bit more, other than just one person. But
it's quite modest, I think, perhaps a little bit more so than the paper might imply.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Councillor Steele?
Yeah, it's a comment. I was away when you had the workshop around Doncaster, Sheffield Airport, and I had a briefing when I returned from annual leave, and I must say we're very good in terms of the detail, very good in terms of delivery. I know that it was a 2-hour session which ran over for about half an hour, didn't it? But very informative, and certainly it left no stone unturned in terms of where we are, what we do. I know Peel, and I know Peel through experience, and I know that South Yorkshire Pensions, when I sat on that, have invested money in infrastructure around the airport, or they've loaned money to Peel, which they get a good return on. So I was particularly interested in that, the whole site, and I thought it was just very good. So feedback from me is that I thought it was a very good exercise, and it certainly raised my awareness to the detail that we've got to go through. And I think some positivity that came through it when there was extra work done to gather more evidence, to present, to get more opportunities for funding to be drawn in, is another good exercise and a learning curve for everyone about the depth of knowledge and understanding that we need to do on a lot of our projects, because it's important that we gain everything right. So spot on, thank you.
Well, you're right, Councillor Steele. I attended that myself, and it was a long meeting that went on and gave much detail on how they've come to the decision and ready to make the recommendations to the board.
Well, my thank you mail is because I was only elected member there, and because of being on leave. So it was positive for me, because they set up a new session and did exactly the same they'll have done it other session, which just shows the quality of the feedback that I got just as an individual, because I've got a pre-book leave. So that's why I'm happy.
Councillor?
Mine's a bit of a structural question, really. Does the structure of the overview and scrutiny allow for any independent members on board? I'm just thinking, when we're looking at things and we're scrutinising, in a lot of organisations you have independent members who are not members of a local authority to provide that outside look. I don't know if you have it on audit standards, but certainly in the council we have independent members, and I just wonder if it's something we should consider, or if not, why not? I think it'd be quite good, because we're all steeped in our local authorities, but sometimes we're scrutinising our own projects, and I just wonder if there's space for an independent person or two people on this body.
It would have to be in the constitution.
That's what I'm saying. It's a structural question.
And somebody's looking at the Constitution right now.
Furiously flicking through. I think there is provision in the statute for co-opted members, but it would be subject to the MCA board making those appointments at the beginning of the year, as we do with elected members. To my knowledge, we've never done it. Not sure of the reason why. But welcome.
Councillor Bacon.
Yeah, this is something that I wanted to raise actually under this agenda item, because I'm with you on that. I think there are certainly ways that we can improve scrutiny here at the South Yorkshire level. So I would like to propose that we recommend to the board that in order to achieve the best outcomes for the MCA, we need to ensure that the scrutiny protocol that the government published in 23 is implemented in full. And that, for example, key principle 5, sustained appointments made on interest and skills, can only be achieved if you implement key principle 8, which is remuneration and status, and that should also be implemented, and that a review of scrutiny should be independently undertaken. That's the recommendations I'd like us to back today.
So that's been moved by you, Councillor Bacon. Is that seconded? That's seconded. All those in favour of that proposal, please show. All those against? That's lost. Thank you very much. Any other questions, Councillor Stowe?
Just a comment about independent and opportunities. We've all got a responsibility. We are elected to do a role, and it's our job to ensure that we've got the skills, knowledge and understanding to be able to do that role. I don't see anything wrong in terms of bringing expert witnesses, because I think expert witnesses would add to the process. But you'd have to have some, if it was an individual who was coming, then the position would be that they would be knowledgeable on every subject. So I'm just of the view that if we are going to bring expert witnesses, it's a different thing than changing constitution in terms of people who sit on this board. But I was asking that question before that. I was going to make that comment before that proposal were put.
Well, we've done proposal. Yeah, Councillor.
Just going back to what Councillor Monaghan has suggested, I think it's a really good point. And an independent person is normally a lay person, so it's not someone that necessarily has an expertise, but it's someone that asks questions. The people that do a job or know the ins and outs. Is about getting their perspective of someone that actually is external, so that they ask questions that are slightly different to the ones that politicians or officers may ask. So I think that was your point, wasn't it? So for example, on audit and standards in council, I'm sure it's the same. I know that it's the same in Barnsley because we share the independent person or one of them. So they are not necessarily people that have experience of being a politician or being an officer. They have varied jobs and life experience, but what they bring is that life experience where they can ask questions on a variety of subjects that are different to that of a politician. That in a way we are kind of marking our own homework sometimes, not always, but I think it would be good to, I agree, it would be good to have an independent person or two that we like the councils do. You advertise. It's really difficult to actually get people to take these jobs, but it would also, in a way, for me, we don't have public questions. I don't know how often we get them. I don't know how you do that. I think last time I tried to go online and see what the deadlines, etc. were, but I know that for council, it's always the same people that ask, because those are the people that are really interested, because it's really actually quite complicated, because there's lots of different deadlines and it's not friendly to someone who hasn't got the time. So actually, in the spirit of openness, I think it's good to have someone external, because then they can bring the Vox Pop life with them and ask questions that we wouldn't think about because we are not in that position.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I agree. I almost completely agree. with Councillor Argenzio. My experience certainly on the audit board here, the audit committee in Sheffield, and also the South Yorkshire Police and Crime panel I've all been on, have all had independent members who've made some really good contributions. It's not. I don't look to the independent members for the vox populi. I don't think that's exactly the point. I hope as elected members we are in touch with the people who elected us, and you know, that we are our job is to represent, and we shouldn't try to outsource that. But I do think it's an opportunity in appointing independent members to bolster the skills on a board like this. We had an independent member on one of the committees who was a professor of mathematics and statistics, and who was absolutely, you know, on the numbers when anything came up that was slightly flaky numbers wise. That was a really useful skill to have. There are lots of other really useful skills. You don't want subject matter experts in the same way that officers are, because you've got people talking to, you know, they've got the expertise on subject matter in the authorities' offices, but they might be lacking, and they might not have the same depth of skills in some of these kind of analytical areas. I think that'd be a really useful thing to get from independent people.
Councillor Bacon.
I mean, this is what's so confusing, Chair, because we've just voted against a recommendation to have an independent review into this. The problem you've got is you don't have sustained appointments that are made on the interest of skills, and that is because nobody really wants to do this job. It's not fought for. So if you've read the scrutiny protocol, you'll see that the government's vision into devolved authorities in terms of scrutiny is to have these roles that we're in now fought for in political groups. So within your political group, people will be vying for this position. But from my experience, that doesn't happen, because if you want to do this job well, you have to spend a lot of time doing it. You know, you have to spend hours researching papers, researching background, and quite frankly, I'd be surprised if anybody on this board has ever done that, because they haven't. As far as I'm concerned, scrutiny at this level is quite amateur, and what we need to be doing is we need to be looking at the scrutiny protocol, which, by the way, both of the political parties have backed. Labour says they're going to take it even further. We need to be looking at that and encouraging the MCA board in an apolitical way to implement that protocol in full. If you have a look at West Yorkshire, what they're doing in West Yorkshire, they've implemented it. They've done it. And what's going to happen here is that we're going to fall behind. In fact, at the MCA board level, the board members were recommended to implement that in full. It warned them if they didn't implement it in full, that we would fall behind other authorities. The board didn't choose to implement it in full. Not full, almost there, but they didn't choose to implement it in full. And what's going to happen is we're going to fall behind other authorities, and the scrutiny board is going to stay immature.
I mean, entitled to your own opinion, Councillor Bacon. I take scrutiny very serious, and I do in Rotherham, as you're well aware. And I think a lot of members around this table take scrutiny serious. And I think that what people do and time and effort they put in is up to themselves. And I don't think scrutiny in South Yorkshire is bad at all. I sat on this body when it was first set up years ago, and there's been massive improvements. And there's been massive improvements from where people do it, and technology's helped in that as well. So you're entitled to your opinion, and I would say, on fetching independent people in, we should ask the board to look at it, because if there's ways of filling them, there'll be ways of filling them, and people who would have to be appointed to it. And we do it in Rotherham. We do it in Rotherham. We have them on all committees in Rotherham. They're entitled, but not on OSMB, but they are on Health, they are on Lives Committee, and there's some on Places Committee. So we do it in Rotherham. So I have no problem with independent people scrutinising and coming from another handle. Councillor Stowe.
Yeah, I think what we all understand, or should understand, is that we come here to look at the role that we're doing, and we've got the process called critical friend. I don't think critical friend comes under the same criteria as insulting people and assumes that people don't read the papers, don't do the research and don't do anything else when they don't even know the other people around the table. And I find it very disingenuous when somebody can come to a meeting, meet people that they don't know and insult them.
I would just say people shouldn't insult anybody around the table. I believe that everybody comes to this table to scrutinise. We're all committed, or we won't be sat around this table doing it. And I don't believe in getting personal in politics.
Chair, just come back just on the person
Go on then, Councillor Bacon.
Just because I felt like that was perhaps aimed at me. What I wouldn't want to do, Chair. What I wouldn't want to do, Chair, is, you know, talk down any individual on this committee. I'm sure everybody has honourable reasons for doing it, and everybody tries their best. The point I'm trying to make is a more general one. That scrutiny could be better, and I think if members disagree with that, then, you know, I think anybody who looks at this committee would probably agree with me, to be honest with you. If somebody could tell me what this committee has achieved in the last few years, I'd be quite interested to know.
What I would suggest, Councillor Bacon, if you believe that scrutiny could be better, and I'm not wavering at you, put your recommendations to officers in writing, so the chair and the vice chair can look at them and come back to a committee meeting. I mean, if you feel that scrutiny is failing, and that's your opinion, I'm not going to criticise you for having your opinion. People's entitled to their own opinion. As I said to people before, if you feel it's that bad, you need to put it in writing to the chair and vice chair and officers, and they can go away and look at it and see what's done. Is that agreed?
I'll do that.
Right. Any other items on forward plan? Well, you're entitled to raise it. We're getting in front of ourselves. Right, next item, bus franchising.
Just waiting for our officer who's available from 3 minutes' time.
Right, I'll have a 3-minute recess, and if anybody wants toilet. Rush. Good afternoon, we're back online. Good afternoon, Matt, welcome to the meeting. You're here to talk about update on bus franchising, and I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matt Goggins, I'm Director of Bus Reform here at Cllr. So the report in your packs provides an update on the progress of the South Yorkshire bus franchising programme. It outlines the key next steps for the programme, and also how we may continue to build on the good engagement that we've had to date with the committee. So, as you know, hopefully, Cllr undertook a comprehensive bus reform assessment, which looked at future options for the bus network in South Yorkshire, and assessed what would be the best option for us to take. The assessment compared what's called bus franchising with other operating models, including partnerships, and the conclusion of that process was clear, that franchising was the best strategic fit for South Yorkshire, offered the best value for money, and was affordable. So following a public consultation and engagement with stakeholders, the Mayor formally decided to proceed with bus franchising on the 18th of March this year. So that's when the decision was taken by the Mayor. Bus franchising will mean that in future the key decisions about the bus network, such as the routes, the fares that are charged, the vehicle standards, will be taken by Cllr rather than the bus operators, as happens now. The bus operators will continue to have a key role, as they will actually still operate the buses, they will employ the drivers, but they'll deliver that under contract to Simca under a specification. So for newer members of the committee, we've engaged extensively with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, both formally and informally previously, and that's set out in the report. We did that as the assessment was developed and also in the lead up to the franchising decision that I mentioned. So the report also looked at how we might build on that good level of engagement that we've had to date as we move forward through to delivery. In terms of programme development, so since the decision in March and the last time that I presented to this committee, we've been building out the team and the delivery programme for bus franchising. So we've had two organisations, Ernst & Young and Sistra, who've been supporting us with some work to accelerate the planning part of that at pace. Both of those organisations have credentials around supporting bus franchising in Greater Manchester and have helped us to really accelerate the pace of the work that's been required around programme development. Over the summer, we've held workshops to define that programme structure, which for us includes both operational and commercial work streams. So the operational areas that we're focused on includes bus depots, so the operating bases for those vehicles, the fleet itself, so the bus fleet, safety, IT and systems. The areas with a commercial focus include things like network design, the actual process of procuring the franchises and the process that we need to go through there, fares, the work around fares that needs to happen, and also what we're describing as the citizen experience. So that is effectively what customers, what users of the network, and hopefully future users should expect from their bus offer in the future. And then we also have a number of cross-cutting themes as well. So things such as finance, the legal support that we're going to need, and the business change process that we'll need to go through. So the programme's structured around three, what we call tranches, so three phases, although tranche is the terminology that we're using. So tranche 1 includes Doncaster and parts of Sheffield, and that will be operational in September 2027. Tranche 2 will be operational around a year later, and that will cover Barnsley and Rotherham. And then tranche 3 will be operational in 2029, and that will be the remaining parts of Sheffield. The franchise contracts for tranche 1 are expected to be signed in early 2027. So therefore, the process for the procurement of those first franchise contracts and the placing of the fleet orders, so the vehicle orders with the manufacturers, those must happen in 2026 in order to hit those timescales. In terms of strategic infrastructure, so the depot estate that's required, in June this year, the MCA board approved what's called a compulsory purchase order process for Olive Grove depot, which is the main depot in Sheffield. So that process, now we've had the authorisation from the board, has now started, and the strategic depot ownership and control, and that might be existing or it might be new depots, but will certainly include upgrades for zero emission vehicles. That's really central to the model of bus franchising in South Yorkshire. In terms of fleet, so we're planning for a core fleet of around 750 buses. Of the new vehicles that we intend to bring into South Yorkshire, we expect at least 30% of those to be zero emission buses, and that is in line with the assessment. But a broader fleet strategy and bus specification is required, and we intend to set that out this autumn. New buses will support cleaner air, they'll provide better accessibility, they'll improve safety on the network, and they will adopt a new South Yorkshire transport brand. Engagement with South Yorkshire residents is going to be key for us. So early engagement this autumn is intended to focus on what we're calling the citizen experience strategy, so really understanding what it is that people in South Yorkshire want from their bus services, and then making sure we tailor the customer offer to meet those needs. It'll also focus on network priorities, so understanding what people want from their bus routes and where we may be able to start to make some improvements. And we'll also focus on bus design and features. So we want to hear about the design features that people want from their buses, and this will be particularly important for people with accessibility requirements. But we also want to use the opportunity to enhance safety and also provide a good environment for drivers to work in. So a real focus on the driver cab and the cab environment for drivers. In terms of the structure, the team structure that we have in place to support all of this activity, so the delivery of bus franchising is led by the bus franchising team, which is within Simca's Transport Directorate. We have what we call a matrix team, so that's partly internal staff that are employed and operate within the team itself. We have a number of contractors that are supporting certain phases of the work. We're bringing in consultants, and we're also being supported by people from across the organisation who are also part of the team as well. So I lead that team. I'm supported by 2 assistant directors, a programme team, and then a range of subject matter experts. So that's how we're approaching this from a practical perspective. In terms of the engagement with this committee, then, so I think taking all of this and looking ahead, there are a few areas that the committee may therefore wish to focus on over the next period. And we've made some suggestions about that. So that might include the specifications for Tranche 1 bus services. It may include new bus design and specification and the fleet strategy. It may include delivery objectives and milestones, and may also include overall programme progress. So in closing, this is a transformative programme for South Yorkshire, and one that will have real impact on people's lives. We're committed to delivering a bus service that works better for everybody. We're also committed to meaningful engagement with this committee going forward to help shape and refine the approach that we're taking, and I welcome the committee's thoughts and questions.
Thank you. That's all really useful. You know, I'm a big supporter of this process. I wish you all success. I think what people out there would be most interested to learn about are what way some of these big questions are going. So network design, the big question for me is, are we still going to want to have all these through routes that are, you save one bus but it's less reliable? Are we going to go for more services that terminate the city centres? That's a really big question. It's a big strategic question, and people might not always realise, but it does affect the reliability of the buses. And what are we doing? What are we going to do about reliability? Are we going to get a much more reliable network? Because that's what we hope. Fares and ticketing. The big question is, what the fare's going to be, and also what's the, are we going to have a South Yorkshire-wide contactless daily and weekly caps system, which, for my mind, is the most convenient for most people, doesn't work for everyone. It seemed to be a no-brainer. Surely we should be able to say we can do that. I'm slightly more nervous about when you started talking about the design of the buses, because there's a danger that maybe I've misunderstood what you said. There's a danger of vanity projects, isn't there? Saying, look, I know Boris Johnson had a bus design that he stuck his name on. I don't think it was particularly good. But that's the road you can end up going down. Surely there are perfectly good buses that you can buy off the shelf, and that any kind of bespoke is just going to cost more, and is that really going to be worth it when for that money maybe you could do a better service somewhere? I'm not sure the public would thank us for that.
Matt, do you want to answer them?
Yeah, sure. So I think you've highlighted 3 of what's actually quite a long list of questions that we're going to need to answer, and we can't answer all of those questions right now. A lot of the work that we're doing is about setting out strategies for for those areas and others that, that you didn't mention as well. So in terms of network design, as an example, some really big questions in there about the extent to which, firstly, we understand how things are operating right now, and we won't really until we have control and we can start to see how passengers are using the service and how the revenue is flowing. So there's big questions there about actually how much do you want to change now, and how much would you want to change in the future, and when you would want to make those types of decisions. And the more you change in line with the introduction of franchising, the more difficult it is, because it has real impact on drivers and the way in which passengers are used to using the service at the moment, and who communicates those changes. It opens up quite a lot of questions that we'll rightly need to answer, but we will need to work through that quite quickly, because if we go to tender for those routes next year, we need to be really clear in that documentation what we're expecting the operators to operate. So these will be things that we answer over the next kind of 9 to 12 months. Similarly, in terms of fares and ticketing, that work will need to be done in terms of specific ticket types and fare levels. I think it's fair to say at the moment it's a really complicated picture for bus users, and this will help with that. It will simplify it will simplify things for passengers. That's the intention, that we do that we have, because we don't need to differentiate between different operators. We'll be able to have a much more straightforward fares and ticketing structure, but we need to make sure that the ticket types and the way people buy tickets is meeting their needs as well, and we don't want to create something that people don't want to use effectively. So we need to work through that. And then bus design, I can categorically say that we're not going to design a brand new bus for South Yorkshire. Manufacturers, that's their job, is to bring new products to the market. Our job will be to make sure that we get the best vehicles that we can for the best price that we can. But when I talk about design, that's often the shell of the vehicle. But then when you look at things like space for wheelchairs and passenger information systems and branding and seat quality and the space between seats and the safety features that a bus might have, that a lot of cars have now, around things like automatic braking if a pedestrian steps in front of a vehicle, how the front end's designed to protect vulnerable people that aren't on the bus. There's actually quite a lot of potential options in all of that, and we want to make sure that we've listened to people when we're looking at those things, and that we're making a informed choice and recommendations about what type of features that we want from the buses that we ultimately bring here to South Yorkshire.
Look at the electric buses with X22 between Barnsley and Rotherham. Good quality, answer store.
Thanks for that, Matt. That brings me seamlessly to my question, and it's in terms of working and consulting with disability groups and organisations, particularly around issues around sight and sound and people with blind or partially sighted. I know we've got Barnsley Blind and Partially Sighted who do work closely with local authority in terms of accessibility to some of our heritage sites and signage and other things. But I do know that there's organisations in Sheffield and Rotherham called Sight and Sound, which do magnificent work in community and voluntary sector to support opportunities for people to actually live a better quality of life, to ensure that that's gone through. Now, when we talk about electric buses, one of the things that will be very dangerous for someone with partially sighted or blind will be noise, or no noise. And that's one of the difficulties. So I think not going into detail about what we might need for accessibility for disabled people, can you give a guarantee that you'll be working with these organisations to look at best practice? I welcome working with Manchester and learning from their experience. It's always best not to start with a blank page, and ensure that you link in with all disability groups, so that you can learn from their life experiences to make it a better service in future, especially around ticketing. Because one of the difficulties you've got now when you go to, for example, a train station and you want the cheapest ticket, it's not easy. And so simplification, but ensuring that people who have got disabilities get accessibility to that process. Thank you.
Can't answer that, Matt.
Yeah, I think all of those areas are in our plan in terms of engagement. So I think you talked about kind of ticketing, vehicles, and kind of the proposition for the bus network. All of those are in the engagement plan, in terms of making sure that we reach out to the right groups that are going to help us get to the best answer, but I guess more importantly that we're designing something and we're creating something that meets everybody's needs. So I think what I would ask is that so we've got a list of people and organisations that we feel we need to go to, but I think my ask would be if you've got specific local groups, then they may or may not be on the list. And I think just let us know if there's a particular group that you want us to engage with, and we'll make sure that we build that into the plan. That obviously that goes for any elected member as well.
So on the groups what you consult with, would that be possible to send a list to the scrutiny committee, and then if they've got any additional groups they can add them on, or contact you to add them on and have a look at?
Yeah, I'm assuming there's no kind of data protection issues around that, then we'll be able to do that, yeah.
Right. Councillor.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt, for the report and for the presentation. Just going back to Councillor Stowe point about visually impaired people, just to clarify, Rotherham Sight and Sound is part of Sheffield Royal Society for the Blind. That's what it's called in Sheffield, so that's another group for you. And as well as the needs of visually impaired people. I think the tram are good because they have the sound and the visual of what's the next stop. So in terms of hard of hearing and BSL user, the visual is also important to know what the next stop is called. And will you also consider the level of noise on buses? Because my morning bus journey, there is a passenger that is often on the bus with me, and they have obviously got some kind of learning disability, but they have their phone really, really loud every morning. And I knew that is a problem for people with neurodiversity. It can be quite upsetting to have that kind of level of noise. And there is a campaign on national trains at the moment in terms of suggesting that people use headphones with signs in it. So that's also something that is important. In terms of the engagement with citizens, I think it's really important, that we have a diversity and we don't always ask the same people, the same organisations that we've asked always. Particularly, obviously, there's the Better Buses campaign. People have been very proactive on this, so I hope that they are on there. But my question, which I had prepared earlier, in terms of, it's great that we, in a way, we're starting from scratch, so we're designing the service as we want rather than, we're inheriting something, but we're also proactively looking at designing, what kind of buses we want. I agree with Councillor Otten. I'd rather have more services that have a bespoke bus that has a pink button for something. I really, I'd rather have something that is functional, even if it's off the conveyor belt, but it's functional enough, but we can spend, be strategic about how we spend the money. But in terms of the prioritising funding, will Simca prioritise funding also on the basis of council investing in infrastructure improvement that to give buses priority over cars? Because there is no point having a zero emission bus if it's stuck in a line of traffic with cars. So in Sheffield we've had, and I'm sure it's the same in the other authorities, we have certain routes where buses are prioritised. So when we do the redesign, will we kind of prioritise those routes? Because that's what what makes buses more reliable. They arrive on time on stops. You know, we have services in Sheffield that have been cut over the years because they can't run every half an hour, which was already not enough because they were stuck in traffic, and therefore they were every hour because then you get the situation where you get 2 or 3 buses, and sometimes quite close to the terminal. So it's quite important also to look at what the routes are like and what prioritization there is. So will Simca also look at prioritizing routes that are, you know, that help buses be punctual so that people don't get disheartened and say, oh, I don't want to go to work on a bus anymore. I'll get the car because I'll get there on time. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think you highlight like an absolutely critical point to the success of this, which is that we need to create conditions out on the network that that buses are going to operate on, which firstly make the operations as efficient as possible. So if we can get buses through traffic quickly, we can get them from one end to the route to the other as quickly as we can. And if you're travelling at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's not much different than if you're travelling, say, 11 o'clock in the morning. And it's that variability in the journey time that often causes a lot of the problems that people feel and experience. It's all of those things together. So you can have a bus network that's on time, but actually it doesn't, because at one time of the day it'll be on time, another time of the day it won't be on time, and the amount of time that you then need to build into the timetable will make it unattractive for users. So making it as efficient as possible. What that does, it also makes it more attractive for people to use, as you've just said, and that means that there's therefore more revenue that comes into the system, and that's the kind of the virtuous circle, if you like, because it's the efficiency and the revenue that allows this to be a success and allows you to reinvest that revenue and reinvest those savings back into the service and back into the network to make it better and better. I think as well that really highlights the partnership approach that bus franchising needs to take as well. So we're managing this through Simca, but this is a partnership with the local authorities in South Yorkshire as well, because it's the local authorities' infrastructure that this network's going to operate on. It's really important that the local authorities feel like they're part of this journey, and that they'll be part of the success of this, and we're going to need the help of the local authorities in terms of creating those road conditions and creating the ability to kind of reinvest that revenue and reinvest those savings back into the network. And yeah, exactly as you've just described, doing that in conjunction and not just assuming that the approach for prioritising routes or prioritising vehicles is a Simca one. Doing that in proper partnership with the local authorities is going to be really important.
Right, Councillor.
Thanks for that. Just want some reassurance, I think, that you're going to be looking at economic infrastructure and developments. I don't want us to fall into the mistake we made with the Advanced Manufacturing Park, where we didn't provide any transport and it caused a major issue. I'm particularly thinking about Doncaster Airport. When I flew from Doncaster Airport, I had to drive, basically. And I think if we're looking at it, it's whether that's a tram train extension or buses or both. We've got to look at what key economic infrastructure we're developing and ensure that people can get there, either to use it or to work there. So I want to be sure that's joined up. The other thing is, we've just done a consultation on community transport. Now, I don't think the two should be taking place separately. I think we're talking here about integrated transport systems, and community transport is very valuable for people who can't get access to the mainstream facilities. So I hope that is going to be linked into an overall strategy. And then what's important to me is the policies. If we're going to change people's, it's battle for hearts and minds really. So learning from Manchester about free travel for young people, that's something I'm not dead interested, if I'm blunt. I suppose I am to some extent, but in a design of a bus. I am interested in the policies we implement for people to make them want to use it and as part of our engagement strategy. For example, I raised in this, in a meeting of this before, I'm a pensioner. I get my OAP bus pass, but I can't use it after 10:30 at night under the current operators. So if I want to go to the theatre, have a drink, I have to pay to get a taxi back. I can't get a bus because your bus pass doesn't allow you to do that. But perhaps I shouldn't be out after 10:30 at night at my age, but you know, occasionally I do like to let my hair down. So it's all those policies, and a number of people have raised that with me. Friends of a similar age, we can't use our bus passes after this time at night. And I raised it with Oliver and he said, well, it's not in our control at the moment. So I want to, you know, think about things like that are a bit off the wall, but that do affect people's... I'd happily get a bus home rather than get a taxi home. A, to be cheaper, but B, to be more environmentally friendly. So just some points, but particularly the economic infrastructure, I'm really worried that we won't address it in time because it's going to require quite a lot of lead-in time. Thanks.
Matt?
Yes, I think franchising gives us an opportunity to change the approach around that. And I've seen numerous examples across the country of, I don't know, a warehouse or a housing estate's being built, and the approach will be, once there's so many people there, we'll then put some transport services in, and actually habits have already started to be formed, and it's quite hard to kind of to break that. And that's a bit of a product of the way in which things operate now, where they need you can't invest for the long term in a service on the hope that it might make a return in 3 or 4 years time. If it's not washing its face, then it doesn't operate. And so you get in this kind of cycle of, you build infrastructure, it's not designed to, and there's no services that are designed to kind of service it. So this allows us to look at things differently and potentially build in transport services at an earlier stage. But it kind of goes back to your colleague's points a few minutes ago. You also need the infrastructure. So again, quite often you will see a housing estate that's being built where the roads aren't wide enough to put a bus service through, as an example. So it needs all of those things to kind of come together really. And I think the kind of the hearts and minds stuff and the policies that are required. I think the example you gave around the bus pass has national kind of rules around it, but again, franchising allows you to be innovative and take potentially different decisions. You need to understand the impact of those decisions on how people use the network, on the cost, on the revenue that you may otherwise receive or not. So franchising allows you to look at those types of things differently.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt, for the presentation and the report. On paragraph 2.1.3, there's a timeline shown with, and it states that the intention is for services under bus franchising under tranche 1 to commence in September 2027, and then further rollouts in Barnsley and Rotherham and the remainder of Sheffield in 2028-2029. Just interested, and I know there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done between now and then, which you've got a detailed plan for. What are the risks around not hitting those dates? And on the other side of it, are there any opportunities to do things more quickly? Because I'm a representative of Barnsley, and 2028 seems an awful long way away. And I'm concerned that residents, who are complaining to me now around bus services, are not going to see any improvement. And I'm basically saying you're going to have to wait for bus franchising. That's my stock answer at the moment. But I do wonder whether actually the services will get worse as the current operators come towards the end of their time.
So I think you've highlighted one of the big risks is that things get worse before we're in a position to be able to intervene and make them better. A programme of this nature has lots and lots of kind of risks around timescales, and because we're working kind of 2 years out to a specific day, it means that we need to be kind of really planned, and that we need to make sure that that programme is moving along at the pace, and that no one work stream is kind of holding it back. And that's a lot of that is about kind of risk management and risk mitigation. So an example would be if we're not able to start the procurement for those big franchise contracts on at the time of next year that we want to do that, then that will put it at risk. Another would be that the production lines are going to take too long for the amount of vehicles that we need to come through to South Yorkshire in order to kind of hit service. So that there are lots of examples and risks kind of inherent in a programme like this. But I think there are potential opportunities as well. So particularly around potentially the ability to bring in improvements to vehicles, perhaps. So, but until we've kind of got into the detail, there are certain tasks that we need to have completed around depots and power and electricity upgrades in order to seize those opportunities. But there are potential kind of improvements that we might be able to make a little bit earlier if the cards fall in the right place.
So Matt, on the specifications, what you're looking at for the contracts, are you looking to change any bus services around at the beginning? Because wouldn't that be risky? Because aren't the companies what mainly operate for profitable routes?
Yeah, if you change too much straight away, then I think I alluded to it earlier. We don't have all of the information right now anyway, and we won't do until we see those services operating. So that it might be sensible to be more cautious about the level of change that you see kind of straight away. But a reason why we're doing this is also because we want to see things improve. So we would then need the ability to be able to make improvements through the life of those contracts. But exactly what you described, there's a revenue implication, but there's also a kind of an operational planning implication as well, and drivers having to learn new routes and doing vehicle testing on new routes that mean that there's got to be a very kind of well thought through process that we need to follow around the network specification.
Is there any other quick questions, because we've run over on this? I mean, what I would suggest is, if the committee agrees, but we talk to the chair when he gets back off holiday and see what we need to bring back to the committee and make sure that we build it into the work programme, if people are agreed to that, what we cover next. Is that agreed? Can I have a show of hands on that, please? All right, thank you very much. I'll then stop at this point and have a 20-minute recess for past. Thank you.
We are feeding you, by the way.
Bill's profile update. I'd like to welcome Councillor Sir Steve Houghton, from Leader of Barnsley Council, to the meeting. The first leader who's actually attended scrutiny, and then we were asking for leaders to attend, so thank you very much, Councillor Houghton. And please, thank you very much for attending with Councillor Houghton. So I'll hand over to you, Steve.
Okay, we've got a slideshow, I think, to take you through, if we can get it up on the screen. Just gives you an overall picture of where we are with skill strategy 1 or 2 areas.
Yes, so we'll need to...
I think it's been, the slides have been in your package, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at them.
the are impact, Steve. Do you want to carry on talking?
We'll carry on, all right.
Because we could put them on
but-
screen when...
I mean, again, it's how long you want us to go on and talk about this. Obviously, skills plan for South Yorkshire. It's been consulted across South Yorkshire with all the various providers in the sub-region, obviously particularly local authorities, but colleges alongside them, because they're the principal providers of adult skills in the area, but also others, plus the business community, plus obviously the skills board, the advisory board that's out there to support us as well. But also based on an evidence of what do we actually need, so we can all think what we think we need and the rest of it. It's where do we think we need to be in terms of the current economic evidence base, the current skills and knowledge base within South Yorkshire, but also where the government's going, because whatever we do, we need to be in line with government policy, because they're going to fund the activities clearly that they think are important. So trying to align all those three things together, it's a complex matrix. But I think the first thing I would say is what came out of that is a significant shift from delivering skills on a business base, and this is not to say we're not delivering skills that doesn't support business, but from a business focus to a person focus. Because what's become clear, even with talking to business, is our priority and their priority is making sure we've got people who are skilled and ready for employment. So very often, and I've been in this game a long time, trying to predict what business will need in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years' time is really, really difficult. And when we ask business, they will often say we don't know. And that's not a criticism of them. They're focusing on the economic world that they currently live in. And it is hard for them to then take a step out and try and think, where's my business going to be 5, 10 years' time, if not impossible. So what businesses more often than not tell us are that it's getting the right people. Get the right people in the right way. We can help shape them then whatever the world throws at us. So making sure that people in South Yorkshire are in that place is going to be crucial to it. And within that then, the skills framework has 3 missions. One, to move those far away from the labour market into work, and that is part of the government's Get Britain Working strategy, but actually from a South Yorkshire perspective, it's particularly about pathways to work, because as you know, we've got over 25%, 27% in Barnsley, 28% in Rotherham. People of a working age are not working. Now, a lot of those won't work. A lot of those are people above the age of 50 who've retired and are going to stay on the golf course no matter what Rishi Sunak might think. A lot of those are students, and they'll be in and out of work as they go through the studies. A lot of those will simply be too ill, disabled to work. But we do think a big part of those are people who can and should be working with the right help and support. And that is the work we've done through Pathways to Work tells us that those people want to work, but they need help. So just simply saying to them, get a job, or simply, we'll cut your benefits, isn't going to do it. We've got to have that help and support through that. And our principal way, not the only way, but our principal way of doing that in South Yorkshire will be Pathways to Work, and then the Health Accelerator, bridging on that, making sure we give people the help to get back into work, but more particularly keeping people in work that otherwise would fall out. So it's a change, yes, for people who are currently, that as DWP would say, the stock, getting them back into work, but how do we stop feeding the stock? And one of those ways significantly are people who are in work and then suddenly find a change in their circumstances. They may have a stroke, a heart attack, break a leg, whatever it might be. Are there ways and means we can support those people to return to work as quickly as possible, or even with some of those issues remain in work so they're not falling into the benefit system? Because one thing we know about the benefit system is if you're on benefits for more than a year, it's very likely you'll stay there. It becomes incredibly difficult to get people back in. And if you're in 2 or 3 years, well, it can become an impossible task for all different kinds of reasons. And this isn't people just being lazy. This is, if you weren't ill, you will get ill, or you'll get even more ill because you're not active and so on. You'll lose confidence. You'll start to pick up mental health issues, and I don't mean mental illness, I mean mental health issues about confidence, anxiety and other things, and these things accumulate and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So routes to help people back in, but health support in particular, to make sure people where they do want to work can do it. The second mission obviously on this then is raising attainment of core skills, and that's the thing business will often tell us, making sure that those key things that will make someone able to get into work and succeed in work are in place. And we can talk about obvious things such as maths, English, IT skills, which increasingly these days you can't get anything off the council if you haven't got that, let alone get a job. Building on that, and sort of core skills are about work and behaviours and presentation and so on and so forth, particularly for young people. We've seen in many areas young people with 10, 15 GCSEs still can't work. Now these are supposed to be the brightest kids, but they've no concept of what work means, how that's going to impact them, what the requirements are. You know, you get up every day and get to work and it's discipline and it's all that stuff. How do we make sure we are getting people in a place where they've got those core skills, or if they're in work currently and are weak on those core skills, it's restricting their ability to move forward. Can we work on some of that as well? And then equally importantly, because we're thinking now more about the long-term economic success of South Yorkshire, we want to be a much more highly rewarded, highly skilled economy with those, you know, higher grade, better grade jobs than we've had in the past. And now a lot of work will go on through other aspects of the combined authorities work to create that, but in reality we need to have that skilled workforce. We want those businesses in South Yorkshire, but what we don't want is people travelling to South Yorkshire from outside taking the jobs. We want our kids in particular, but our residents more generally, to have those higher skills and focus on that. So again, rethinking our priorities around those three key missions to get there, and a series of actions around it. What we are producing is a series of action plans to try and do that. Obviously those things in each of those categories, what we do know is we need to deliver those locally. So it's a framework for South Yorkshire, but delivered in Sheffield, in Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster, wherever it might be, because the delivery of that needs to be slightly different. You know your own areas and what's required. But it is within that framework, and it is within those outcome targets. It's not saying we're moving away from that. So we're all agreed on what we need to do, and to be fair, all four districts are up for it. But it is having flexibility to say we might need to approach that. You know, Sheffield isn't Barnsley and vice versa. So the way you approach that locally might be slightly different. But we do want to performance manage that and make sure, whichever way we do it, that action plan does deliver that. And in each of those, if you see on the papers you've been given, there's a whole, and I won't go through every delivery activity, but they're all in there on how we might approach some of that stuff across each of those particular examples. So what we also want to do is pull the skills hub and the apprenticeship model together within the combined authority, because I'm not criticising others for the work that's being done, but there is a feeling around those two key areas we need more central leadership, direction and control, if I'm being blunt, because that has got very disparate, and that doesn't mean to say good work hasn't been done, but I think our view is we're not getting the biggest bang for the buck out of it, and us driving that forward central I think would be better. Obviously what that all means for our providers, and particularly the colleges, but local authorities as well, is we need to ensure that their activities are aligned to those missions. Well, we don't want to say this is where we're going, but we're doing something else on the ground. And that means aligning the funding appropriately across South Yorkshire between the districts, and that the providers are doing the things we need them to do, which will achieve those outcomes, those goals that we want. So again, there's work going on, working with the colleges, looking at that new framework. Now the framework hasn't been agreed by the CA yet, so just in case many a slip, twixt, cup and lip, but assuming it is, that work's being undergone with the college, and my understanding is they're all up for that and wanting to work with us to try and drive all this stuff forward. The next set of slides you've got, I don't know if Fliss wants to dib in on this anyway, I'm grabbing it all. is the Get Britain Working Plan. You know the government set itself a target of 80% employment rate. Every combined authority in every area in the country is being asked to produce a plan to try and get them there. Clearly a big part of ours is pathways and all that goes with it. And you can see on there, there's an overview about what the issues are that we think we've got in South Yorkshire, about the nature of work and people in it, and how we can try and address some of those things. So again, we're producing a plan around all that, and again, a lot of that is about health and other things, if I'm being truthful, addressing the things that are keeping people out of the labour market, that historically people shouldn't have been falling into that. I don't criticise people for that. The way the world's worked, we've got to change the way the world's work and support people for much better, but also to make sure, again, we drive that with performance management and we hit the targets around in that. So again, within, there are some particular groups we want to address. So NEETs, young people, people with long-term health conditions, disabilities. Mental health is a particular worry amongst young people, and this is a national issue, not just something for South Yorkshire, but particularly since COVID, but it was going on before that. I think we've seen a drift over a number of years. Young people finding themselves with, inverted commas, mental health issues and then not finding employment. We can and should address that, and that should be something we are capable, in my view, of sorting out with the right support. We don't want this culture of there's an alternative world out there on the benefit system, as bad as it might be, instead of working. So we've got to get a culture. I think, personally, and this is not Fliss's view, all the combined authorities, we should have a culture work. If you can work, should work. That's where we should be beginning from, not, well, there's alternatives and it's too difficult or I don't like it or whatever. I was brought up in a world where you get a job and you go to work. I think we've lost some of that, if I'm being truthful, and I don't want that to be brutal on people. But reality is, I think we have drifted and we've got to try and pull that back. Alan Milburn said during the Pathways to Work development, this has to become a mission, not just a programme, it has to become a mission about work. And I think we've got to do that, and it'll need leadership and direction, and sometimes that's hard because you're giving hard messages to people, but if we don't, we can't keep drifting in the way nationally as well as locally. We can't keep drifting in the way we can. The benefit system, you know, you can have the vast majority on benefit in work and supporting the minority on benefits. It doesn't work the other way around. It doesn't. So we've got to make sure we help people into it. It's not brutalising people, it's helping people into work and getting that culture back that maybe we had before deindustrialisation and a lot of other things, where there was a real strong work ethic, particularly in South Yorkshire, and recreating that in another way if we possibly can. So you can see in there some of the priority groups we want to work with, and many of them are disadvantaged groups, supporting them doing that. And you can see from the slides again, the Get South Yorkshire Working Plan, 4 pathways: prevention, engaging people and empowering people back into work, sustaining them there, and obviously getting people to thrive while they're in work and show people there's a career path in there. It isn't just, you know, you're stuck in a dead-end job for the next 40 years. It's trying to create ambition, and that's an issue for many of us in South Yorkshire, to create more of that. But I think more confidence in people about work and what they can do and what they're capable of, because that feeds in many of our deprived communities at a young age. We need to break the mould around some of that. The Adult Skills Fund papers in there, I'll not go through each and every bit, but again, it's modelling it against the 3 missions that I talked about earlier on, and making sure the allocations and the programmes we deliver are all around that, and that gives you some of the detail of what we're talking about to the providers, and particularly the colleges, moving forward. So making sure everything's always aligned. If I'm being honest, I don't think that's been the case in South Yorkshire previously. So we've had this strategic plan, but very often then the read-through hasn't been there. Making sure we've got one whole effective system, and that's a system everybody's bought into and contributed to. It's not top-down is what we want to do. It's been created bottom-up, but once we've done it, that's what we all stick to when we have the discipline around all that. And again, there's some issues in there about detail and other things. I'll not try and tread each one. And then integrated support employment support services across South Yorkshire. I've already alluded to about apprenticeships and the skills bank as a single unit, but also making sure each authority is joined up in its own area. And again, that we haven't got a load of disparate things going on. We all know what we're aiming to do. We're all joined up, and we can be as effective as we can. And that's particularly true for pathways, because we've had money off the government on that. We've got to show that that's going to deliver. And I think it is starting to do that from a standing start from 2 or 3 months ago. So, but there's a long way to go on that. What I will say is moving from where we are now to where we want to be is not a quick fix. There are cultural issues to work through, both in communities and between organisations. There are huge challenges around starting from a low skills base, so which we are, let's be blunt. So that feeds back into school years and other things. One of the things I'm interested in is the government's coming out with a new skills strategy from 16. My view is that should be from 14. Actually, it should be earlier in too, but let's start at 14, because how do we get kids at their age? Give them an alternative to some of the current curriculum in schools that will get them work ready, that will get them that skill set, as opposed to doing things that may be good on paper but don't really give them those employment opportunities they've got. So I think there's a piece of work we maybe could look at as part of devolution going forward. Is that something we could look at in South Yorkshire to help a lot of these kids? Because 55% of kids are getting, the standard GCSEs, which means 45% aren't. That's a big gap, and we need to keep driving those numbers up. But that's still a big group of kids coming out. What we're doing with them, is the system helping them in the way that it could, to make the most of themselves, but also to make them employable. And there is no prosperity without a job. There just isn't. So gearing them up for that, I think, is, and all our strategies hopefully will do some of that anyway. But I think there's more we can do at earlier years around some of that, so we're not recovering kids to a point. Colleges very often spend the first couple of years at, if you go to an FE college, recovering what they didn't achieve in school. Wouldn't it be great if they didn't have to do that and that was done for something else? So yeah, big challenges around all that. What I do think though, it puts us in a strong position compared to where we've been previously. I think it puts a strong position relative to where the government is, and I think in truth we are trying to do the right things that South Yorkshire need, because it's an evidence base now. So hopefully in the years ahead we can start and see some progress. So that's enough from me. I don't know if Fliss, you want to add anything? Probably a lot, because I've missed lots. But
there's just probably 2 points that I would like to raise, and then open it over to questions from you. So one, I think we talk about a number of plans, and it's to give you assurance that they all hang together. And so therefore the skills strategy implementation plan, underneath that the Get Britain or Get South Yorkshire working plan feeds into it, the ASF commissioning plan feeds into it, the employment support paper feeds into it. So they are all part of how we implement where we want to go as a system across South Yorkshire. And I really do echo what Sir Steve said. I feel for the first time we have a clear plan. We're bringing this together as a system to therefore bring together disparate funding streams to make sure they work for us at place for our residents to make a difference. And by making a difference to our residents, being informed by business demand and where we want to go to see a sustainable growth, this will give us a good platform to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So your subject matter is per usual, Councillor Houghton.
You test me any questions, Fliss will answer those.
Thanks for that, Steve. I know this has always been a passion of yours, the skills strategy, from when we were on Objective 1 using European Social Fund together, and the Yorkshire Forward Board as well. It's my passion as well, because I've worked in an organisation that delivered Objective 1 and is now delivering on Pathways Zest, where the importance of key workers is absolutely crucial. And I just want to know how this aligns with the DWP plans for reforming job centres, or doesn't it? Because My personal opinion is job centres don't work clearly for the people we're trying to get to in Mission 1, the Pathways group of people. They'd much rather go to a locally trusted organisation that is separate from the benefit system, where they can be, it's more honest and trusted. The other thing for me, you mentioned ex-offenders in one group, but I'm thinking about offenders. Do you remember that a long time ago, Yorkshire Forward funded a programme in one of the region's prisons where people were actually trained, so they did skills. There was a bakery in Barnsley, actually, that used to recruit and take a lot of ex-prisoners who'd done a baking course, but they learn things like construction and everything else. And everything shows that people who go out of prison into employment are less likely to reoffend. And given the state of our prisons, I wonder if there's some joining up we could do, working perhaps, looking at that, keeping people out of prison, engaging them in meaningful employment. So, alignment of job centres, the prison, alignment with, is it Home Office prisons or whatever, yeah. And also, I agree with you about young people. I represent one of the most deprived wards in South Yorkshire, and there are kids there who don't have the basic competencies of what it means to work. And it's too late when they leave school at 16. We've got 17 or wherever. We've got to change the curriculum and how we do that with a DFE. So I can see a lot of strands here with links to emerging government policies and government departments that all this could fit into. So I welcome it, but just a couple of, suggestions for how it could be improved, really.
I mean, first I'll pick up some of the data where we are with the prisons, but part of Pathways to Work is to look at all client groups and what's needed. I do know training and education does go off in prisons, because there's a friend of my wife who heads up one of the teams in one of the serious prisons in this part of the world. So I know the work she does with prisons and other things. So there are activities going on in there. Whether they're aligned or not is a good question, and I don't know the answer to that, if I'm being honest.
When the Yorkshire Forward funding stopped, that programme ended.
Yeah.
And it isn't about education in its broadest sense. It's not.
No, it's about.
It's about giving people practical skills.
Yeah.
Where they can walk out and get a job on a building site tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, on DWP are an integral part of Pathways. So they sit alongside us trying to make this new whole system picture work. So no criticism on there. They've been very supportive to try and do that. But we are just South Yorkshire, so we're a pilot for this. It's not being done in other places, albeit there's been a lot of interest shown from other places about taking it up. But at the moment, South Yorkshire's being funded to do this in relation to that. Other areas in the country, and I disagree with them, think job centres are the answer. Well, actually, a lot of the people we're talking about here never see a job centre. And I would argue, currently, job centre staff do not have the skills set to do some of the things we want to do. However, there are other pilots in part of the world that are trying to change those job centres into a much broader approach. So we'll see what that brings. But I think what job centres are good at, one is policing, well, DWP is good at, is policing the benefit system and getting the short-term unemployed back into work, turning them over. Very good at that. Let them get on with it. They don't need my help. They can do it very well. What they're not good at, and what they've never been geared up for, is that economically inactive group that's been away from the system, from work for quite a long period of time, and they don't have the skill sets for that. And actually the solutions to that don't lie within the job centres. Some of the solutions might be in an hospital, it might be with a GP, it might be elsewhere in the health system, it might be in the skills system. So what we're trying to do here is join all those bits up and make it person-centric. So every person who goes through Pathways to Work in South Yorkshire will have an advisor, personal advisor, who will navigate all the complex systems that are out there for them, be it health, be it skills, be it transport, be it whatever, and try and make sure we are meeting their needs, as opposed to where we've been historically is, here's a load of things, you fit into them. No, we're going to make the things fit you, and that will give you a better chance to get a job.
Just coming in quickly about working with the probation and also prisons. So we had commissioned a course for skills boot camps, short courses into employment with the prisons. But that's recently come to light that is in breach of DFE rules, although DFE were asking us to take it forward. So it's a live conversation about how we can take that forward. So it's work we're actively pursuing, and we're trying to make sure that we can take that forward. So it's something we're exploring, but currently government funding rules mean that we can't take that forward. In relation to the probation service, we have commissioned some joint activity with them as well. So it's an area where we are focusing on knowing that actually there's some good work that we can do together, and appreciate actually that the continuity of support just isn't there. And so trying to work with the prisons within the region to make sure that that can flow through. So something we're looking at, haven't cracked, but we'll continue to take forward.
I mean, on the curriculum, the government have said they're going to look at the school's curriculum. I'm not sure it's in the way I'm talking about. I think that's a different way, but we've had a discussion about whether we could approach ministers to see if some of the things we're thinking about, 14 to 16, what could we change? And I'm the first person in Barnsley every August looks at the GCSE results and say, how have we gone on? And for the last 20 years I've been at schools and everybody else to drive up those numbers, and we should continue to do that. So I'm not moving away from the importance of that, but let's be frank, it isn't serving a lot of kids, is the truth of it. And if we can find other alternatives, still doing core skills, English, maths, coding, you know, that kind of thing that everybody's going to need. But beyond that, then, what other offers could we give young people? It can't just be history, geography, French, whatever. And all those are great things. Don't misunderstand me. But for a lot of kids, I think there are other things we could be giving them as an offer, which will get them much more ready for employment and all that goes with that. And at the moment, they don't get that.
So just I've got council and council still, then I'll bring in council.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very supportive of what we're trying to achieve here. The three missions seem the right missions to me. I mean, a lot of it's pretty, common sense, but it's, clearly, we need to get more people working, and we need to upskill people as well. Now, on the ambition, it refers to an additional employment need of nearly 60,000. Getting more than 60,000, around 60,000 people into work. My question is, do those 60,000 jobs exist at the moment? I don't know what the current level of vacancies is in South Yorkshire. I know that certain sectors will have vacancies, such as the NHS, such as the care sector. But to achieve that, as well as upskilling people, is there also a need for economic growth and to create more jobs? Does it link in with that economic growth strategy as well?
I mean, the answer to the question is yes. So first of all, there are vacancies out there. I don't know every individual district, but I can comment on Barnsley with more vacancies than people looking for them. So there are opportunities to get people in and fill some of that target, but that won't be enough. The size of our business base in South Yorkshire is not what it should be. So, and there is a figure which I can't remember, the business people will tell you, but we need to create more businesses to create the employment levels that we are talking about. So yeah, the two go hand in glove. Now, to some degree, particularly on the high skills, you need one begets the other. So you want high skilled businesses to come. The first thing they'll say is, well, have you got a workforce for me? There you go. So, well, but I can't get people interested until they can see the job opportunity, and so you get into this cycle. So we do need for the two things to work in tandem. So get the growth going, fill the vacancies that are already there, so some big opportunities there now we can do some quick wins with, But 60,000, I don't want anybody to think this is an easy target. It's not. It's a really stiff target. So it's easy to say these things. To do them is very difficult. And of course, that's subject to the UK economy, the world economy, and all the rest that goes with it. But if we don't set our, aim up here, if we get here, that'd be a good result. Let's be ambitious and see how far we can get with that. But we do need more businesses, and we do need, through those businesses, more job opportunities. Now, our preference is not just more jobs, but better jobs. So people are getting better rewards for that. But equally, we've got to have an economy that provides employment for people of all abilities, so we can satisfy some of that as well. So it will be fairly diverse offer. But yeah, this is a stiff target we set.
Councillor Stowe, keep your question short.
Excuse me. Thank you very much for your presentation and report, Steve. I've written some questions down that you've already answered, but I'd like to go into them in more depth, and it's in particular around academies. Early intervention, less exclusions, and more opportunities to prepare young people for colleges. Are we going to link that in? Because my experience with principals at academies, not in Barnsley, because I don't deal with academies in Barnsley, but in another authority, was the question that we're always asked when we ask for more in academies were who's going to pay for it. And it's linking that funding into the needs. Now, again, that takes us on to my second part. When we look at forums and employer groups, the use of potentially artificial intelligence, so it could give better projections where you say they don't know. Using artificial intelligence, then it might give the opportunity to attract more businesses, which we need to do. And it's all them strands, it's just a matter of getting it together and doing that. And your report mentioned all that, but it's just doing that finite bit to get them into wanting to develop in South Yorkshire. I know when we talk to people about employability and the criticism I've had about some of the jobs that are being developed in South Yorkshire, apart from when we talk about the what they call it down in Rotherham. It's just gone out there, that's the one. About developing that throughout South Yorkshire. I know there's a proposal to link in to Sheffield and Rotherham as part of plans, but it's expanding that out into Doncaster and Barnsley, and how we managed to do that. So it is a meander around questions, and you'll have picked a number of answers that you're going to bring back to me. But I think, just going back to that about prisons, one good initiative was Timpson's. Yeah. Timpson's, so it's learning from the experience that we've already got. So I'll finish off my bit by, as I usually do, is do you agree with me?
Always agree with you, Councillor Stowe, you know that.
Which is a short question, what?
But no,
yeah, I'm trying to work it
questions,
out, but anyway,
questions have been answered in terms of, but it's about the buy-in.
Yeah.
The buy-in from colleges, academies, employers, representatives, Chamber of Commerce and all that, and their commitment to. I remember when I started work, many, many years ago, I started in an organisation that guaranteed 40 apprentices a year, every year. We need that commitment from employers who will be looking to develop the apprentice schemes that they need to suit their business, and that's where artificial intelligence comes into it.
I mean, the first thing is, as part of our economic strategy, certainly we're doing it in Barnsley, and it's true across South Yorkshire, is we need to make sure the existing business base is secure for the future. Because you can create a lot of new business and jobs coming in, but you're leaking them out the other end. So is the current business base in a place where it understands its own business, it understands its own future, and it's got access to the technologies that it's going to need to give that security long term? And there is work going on between local authorities, the universities, particularly around AI and tech, to make sure we give those businesses the insights that they need, and then potentially the particular technical support they need to do some of that stuff. So, for example, in Barnsley, we've got this idea of the National Technology Centre, and its primary focus is on existing businesses, gearing them up for the future, so they're ready for everything that comes, as well as being attractive for new business, skilling people and so on, but making sure that our existing business base is in the best place that it can be, because the nature of it is going to change. So businesses are up for that. We are trying to support them in that to secure the thing we've got there. In terms of more advanced technologies going forward, we've got the investment zones, so the HMRC in the area in Rotherham and Sheffield, forgive my geography, it's not very good. It's part of that. We've got the investment zone in Barnsley, and we've got one in Rotherham and one in Doncaster. They are particularly geared up to more high-tech businesses, the kind of stuff you're seeing on HMRC, trying to repeat that. Not necessarily the same stuff, but at the same high level across South Yorkshire. We got that. We were the first combined authority in the UK to get that investment zone approach. Government's giving us money towards that, and obviously we're working now across the 4 districts to see how we're going to populate that in terms of that high-tech business expansion, which we all want, and obviously the universities and others are tied into that to make sure we've got the best possible offer to create the kind of businesses and jobs that we want. In terms of apprenticeships, we've had this discussion time and time again. We all want more apprenticeships. It's a valued route, particularly for kids in deprived areas or other things, for getting skills. And the colleges are all up for that. The problem is placements. Getting the placements in businesses, that element is a real challenge, because big businesses will do that, and I encourage the public sector to practice what it preaches and take apprentices on, because we're big and we've got the capacity to do it. But increasingly our business base is relatively small to medium enterprises, and it is incredibly difficult for them to have the capacity, the skills, the time to provide what's needed for that apprenticeship. So we're going to have to think about how can we provide apprenticeships in a different model, in a different way. Because I can't ask, you've got a business of 6 people, take an apprentice on, it's a massive potential burden on that business. I'm sorry to say it, but it is. And asking people to cope with that, they just can't. So it's a struggle for us to do that. Barnsley College tells us, ready to go, got money, got everything, can't get them placed. So how do we resolve that? And again, work's going on to see how we can rethink some of that and do that apprenticeship stuff a bit differently. Again, back into schools, yeah, we need to be in there much earlier. And I think all 4 councils are trying to do that in their own way. Some's more successful than others. Some academies are more receptive than others, I'm being blunt. We need a much more systematic approach across South Yorkshire, how we can build that up. And again, people trying to think about what the best way of doing some of that is. You talked about exclusions. It's a challenge. It's challenging Barnsley, I'll tell you. We've won academy. Every time they have a problem, that seems to be the answer to it. We've got to get away from that and keep kids within school. And part of the solution to that for me is having that different offer. That kids will want to be there and desperate to be there, because they can see it's relative to something they're more interested in, more capable of, maybe more practical for them, whatever, and trying to adjust the curriculum that way. One of the problems we have at the minute is schools are judged on GCSE results. That's it, give or take. So all they are focused on, and I don't criticise schools here, because if that's how you're going to judge me, that's what I'm going to do. And they will find the best methodologies of getting those results up as they can. But that doesn't suit every child. It can lead to exclusions. It can lead to kids with special needs being left behind if you're not careful, as we simply focus on raising that raw data. We've got to get Ofsted and the government to judge schools on a wider basis than just GCSEs. Not forgetting GCSEs. Come back to every August, I'm there, how many we got? and that's what I wanted for my kids. First thing I did, do your GCSEs, then your A-levels, then you're going to university. Bang, bang, bang. So I get all that. But equally, that doesn't happen for every family everywhere. And we need to look at this and value other alternatives just as much as some of that stuff.
It really is, it's just expanding on that, what you said. I've worked in schools, in junior schools, and I would say even from year 5 and 6, they need to be focused on something other than getting results, because they're just going to go to the secondary and they're not interested. They're not going to go, they're going to skip. So it definitely something, if you can target that kid with something that they're interested in, fantastic. But there's no way that they're going to go into secondary and try and stay in mainstream school. It just doesn't happen, and I've seen it. And like you said, with exclusions and trying to keep inclusion as well, I've been running around playgrounds and trying to bring the children back in every afternoon. It's a nightmare. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And like you said, 14 may be too late. I think earlier intervention would be a lot better.
Yeah, I won't dispute it. What we've got to have though, because I don't remember this because it was just before my time, but we used to have something called the 11 plus. And actually what the 11 plus in theory was about is sorting kids out to meeting their needs. What it became was pass and fail. And if you went to grammar school, you were a success. If you went to secondary school, you were a failure. So we can't have that recreated in a different way. What we've got to have is there are just different routes. They are all good. They are all valuable. They will all assist you. And it may be some really bright kids want to get engaged in employment. Great. You know, as I said to you, with examples, kids with 10, 15 top A stars, GCSEs, employers saying, I want to employ them because they ain't got a clue. So they're good at that, but that wider stuff, they've little or no understanding of. So we just got to find, for me, a system that supports kids in different ways. And I say it's 4 or 5 in it really, but from a practical sense, and getting the government to shift stuff, those 2 years, we do know where a lot of those kids are heading by then. With a pretty good idea on what might be suitable to give them an alternative. But you're right, so we can get on with some of this stuff, the better.
My sister did 11 plus, I didn't. Councillor Bacon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for coming along. We're quite honoured to have you as the first portfolio holder to come to scrutiny. If we're just on the subject of exclusions, I just wanted to say that actually I think sometimes exclusions are necessary, because otherwise what you get is classrooms being dragged down and teachers unable to control the classroom because of a few in the minority, and that doesn't do well for others in the class. That's quite evidence-based. The evidence actually shows is you need to go down the middle ground and not exclude. The evidence is quite clear on that. But what I wanted to ask you was about the free courses for jobs underspend during the 2020 and 2023 years. South Yorkshire underspent that budget by 70%, or almost 70%, and that was returned back to government. When you look at places like Liverpool that actually overspent, what do you think went wrong here, in your words as a portfolio holder?
That's a difficult question for me to answer without being all over the minutiae of that. I think, one, we didn't have, as we have now, an overall strategy and outcomes framework which we were working to. So what we got then were a lot of different activities and schemes where focus wasn't maybe where it should be. So I'll be honest and blunt about that. And so it's easy for things to drift. And I think that was part of a lack of performance management during that period. Secondly, I think we were, as I've said, we were focused on trying to raise skills and raise the skills base, raise other areas of activity where we were weak, where we thought that was the key, whereas now I think we now understand you've got to approach this at different levels. So 2 things, a better understanding now of what's needed, and a much more laser-like focus on every aspect of that, or at least there will be coming through the new position.
Okay.
No one wants to send money back, and I'm the last person who wants to send money back.
No, of
It
course.
was supplementary to the
I'm
account
sure that's
application.
the case. So could you just enlighten the committee then? What is your day to day then? Because of course you're leading a council as well, but you also have this important portfolio on a South Yorkshire wide basis. What is the day to day like for you? How is this role integrated with your day to day at the council?
At the council, let's begin. We've got a South Yorkshire economic strategy, which is the 4 local economic strategies plus what we need to do South Yorkshire wide to give us a total picture for South Yorkshire. So skills is part of that. So we have a skills strategy in Barnsley, and with a skills strategy now developing a new one for the whole of South Yorkshire. So in terms of my work in the council, one, I'm working with adult education in Barnsley, because we're an outstanding provider, to make sure we are delivering our element of what South Yorkshire needs, but also Barnsley needs. And I work with Barnsley College to make sure they're delivering against what we need, what we think we need for Barnsley. That also comes together in the Barnsley 2030 board, where all our strategic partners work together, and one of our strategic objectives is learning Barnsley. Well, you're asking me how it interfaces.
Can I come in? I'm just quite conscious we're quite limited on time. We don't have sort
you
of
asked him the
all the
question.
day.
You asked him the question, Councillor Bacon.
What I'm asking,
Houghton,
I'm after a specific
Councillor
specific
Houghton
answer,
is
if I
responsible
can.
for his own answers.
Okay,
You are not
Chair.
responsible for it's Councillor Houghton to respond to answer your question.
Yeah,
You asked
if
the
I can,
question,
this is basic
Councillor
scrutiny.
Houghton
If I can.
answered it.
Thank you. I appreciate. I know you're part of the same party and you want to defend him.
Forget
That's
the
okay, Chair.
party.
I'm
Forget
gonna-
the party.
Thank you,
I'm
Chair.
here as chair of this committee, and let me tell you, you asked Councillor Houghton about his role as Barnsley Council and how it rolled in with this job as well. That's what the question you asked him.
No,
Councillor
well, if I
Houghton
can just clarify,
answered
I
it.
think you're doing quite a bad job at chair at the moment, quite frankly. Still, so if I can just if you can just let me clarify, I can clarify my question, because quite frankly we don't have all day, and what the question I was going to try and ask, leader, was what does your day-to-day look like in terms of hours? How much time do you spend at Simca on your portfolio compared to your time at the council?
I spend more time on the council than I do with Simca. Of course I do. Do I sit here and say I'm doing 4 days in Barnsley and 1 day on Simca? No, because it doesn't work like that. I'll be spending bits of each day either directly with work on Simca. So I'm here today. I've got the board meetings that we have clearly as the leaders board with the mayor. Working outside that with Fliss and the team on the skills stuff. So I don't put a clock against any of that. For me, that's just part of the job that I do as leader of the council. The bulk of that is in Barnsley, of course it has to be. That's my primary role. But it is a significant amount of time I spend with this. But what I'm also saying to you is it doesn't split that way, because my role in Barnsley is to deliver the Barnsley bit of the Simca strategy. And that's not just on skills, that's on economic regeneration, it's on the environment, it's on net zero, it's on whatever. Are we doing our bit in Barnsley to support that South Yorkshire strategy as well? So I may be working on it from Barnsley, but at the same time I'm working on it for Simca, because they are one in the same. So no one's sitting there and saying, oh, it's a day a week here, or it's 2 days a week there. It's not as simple as that. Some weeks I'm spending more time on Simca than I am in Barnsley. Sometimes I'm in Barnsley and nothing on Simca. It depends where we are in the cycle of things. It's not nice and simple.
So if I may, Chair, just ask, are you able to give an hourly figure on that in terms of weekly? Okay. Okay. No. Well. It's no. Of course, it's just the basics that the committee I think ought to know, because obviously we've never heard from any portfolio holder here in the whole time the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authorities existed. And if you look at the scrutiny protocol, that was on you guys as portfolio holders. But I'm glad you're here now. So then, what's your views on commissioners? Because the government have obviously, they're giving further devolved powers for MCAs to employ commissioners, and one of those could be in skills and employment. What's your views on that?
On commissioners, at this moment in time, I don't think we're in a position where we need that. We've got a grip professionally through Fliss and the team on the strategy and what we need to do, and it's now as strong than it's ever been. So some of the things that might have happened in the past are not going to happen now because we've got the professional grip that's needed. We've got a strategy in place which everyone is now bought into. And as everyone said, no one's disagreeing with it, it's the right one. And there's a commitment, hopefully there will be when we've signed it off next week. There's a commitment from each of the 4 districts to deliver against it. And we are now much better at performance management than we were in knowing exactly where we are. So at this moment in time, I would, to be convinced about a commission, I need to see where that added value is coming from. If someone can come and say, Steve, you do this and we'll up your achievement rates, then I'll look at it. But I don't want someone just coming in and trying to replicate what we're already doing. That's not going to add any value. But if someone can come and convince me that, you know, I'm not here saying it's all about me. I'm no expert. This is the expert sat next to me. But someone can come and add some value and improve us, then I will always want to improve us. But you're going to have to convince me it's not just a title and another bright idea from central government that we all need this year. Well, I've seen them before.
Any more questions on the strategy? If not, then we're all happy with what's gone off today, and possibly see you back in 12 months' time, Steve, to
Whenever.
see some improvement on the
Chair.
report. Thank you very much for your time, for coming along this afternoon.
No problem. My pleasure.
Everybody's been insulted.
Listen,
So
that you
we're
should
just
see
going to
some
go
of the stuff I
into
get.
councillor. Just going to go into a recess. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Again, on to item 12, Mayor's Introduction Scrutiny, Mayor Oliver Coppard. Oliver's here to take questions from the board, so I'll open it out. Anybody got any questions to Oliver? Councillor Hunt, I'll let you go first.
Thanks, Chair. Good to see you, Oliver. First question's about the airport. It's been announced recently that there's £160 million investment to reopen the airport. Is that the maximum figure, or are there other scenarios that could mean even more money will be spent to reopen the airport?
It's not the maximum figure in the sense that actually there's already a 16 million pound sum that's already been put towards it. So it's 60 million plus 159.5. So just for clarity, just because I know that's in the paper, so you'll have seen that anyway. That's the commitment we are making now. I'm not intending to make a bigger commitment to the airport. There are other ways which we might want to invest in the wider project. So for instance, there might be opportunities for us through, for instance, investment zone funding to invest in businesses on the Gateway site, because you'll know that we've got an ambition around sustainable aviation. There is the opportunity to use business rate retention to either offset or contribute in greater sums, because we've got bigger ambitions, because it's all going very well, to the development of the site. But the sum that the MCA through gain share is prepared to commit is £159.5 million, and you'll see if you read the report, and I realise it only came out last night, so you'll get the chance to read that clearly. It makes very clear in there that we are committing a sum with a ceiling for the very reasons that I think you are alluding to, which is we don't want to get dragged into a place where we are just simply adding more and more money to that project.
So
Usually we just ask one, but I'll let you ask
just a follow-up on that. So does that therefore mean that if that sum is not sufficient to enable the airport to reopen, that it won't reopen?
No, what that means is that the reason why we've kind of taken this time and this space in order to do it, and you'll know that in Doncaster, for instance, there have been people who've said we should have taken this decision sooner, we should have just jumped in with both feet, the day after the airport closed. I've always disagreed with that position. I think you probably would as well. Because we needed to do our due diligence, do the work in order to get us to a place where we understood what the challenges, the risks, the opportunities, and indeed the costs look like. So we're confident about that number. That is the amount we are prepared to put in. I can't speak for Doncaster, but absolutely that is the amount that we are prepared to put into that project. I think we're all clear about the objectives, but also clear about now what that project plan looks like and what we need to do in order to get it off the ground. So that's our ambition, and that's why we're putting in that sum of money.
Councillor Bacon.
Hello, Oliver.
You all right?
Good to see you. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you.
I just wondered if you could just to clarify the announcements made into flights taking off at DSA from 2028. What we saw at the last election, particularly in Doncaster, was announcements that flights would take off by spring 2026. So what happened there? And did that particular candidate who put that message out receive assurances from your office that that would be the case?
No, I think what's your badge? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, it's the coat of arms of Rotherham Council.
Oh, right. Look, this project is a dynamic project. I mean, there is no doubt about this. This is a challenging project for us to get off the ground. It's why we've spent so much time. There's 1,000 pages. I'm sure everybody around the table will be reading those over the weekend. 1,000 pages of due diligence, which has shown kind of the degree to which we have investigated all of the different eventualities, what the project looks like, and how that can thrive. Not just DSA, but the Sustainable Aviation Hub and the advanced manufacturing work at Gateway East. It's difficult. And so kind of we are clear now about that timeline, and that timeline now looks, I think, probably different in my mind, at the very least, to kind of where we started. But now I am able to say with some clarity that in 2028, we will have those passenger flights going out of DSA. And look, things change, times change, we learn new things as we go along. But for clarity, I don't think Ros was ever sort of saying, and I know you're alluding to Ros Jones, I think Ros has been quite clear about wanting an open airport as soon as she possibly can. That's always been her ambition, and I applaud her in her ambition. But at the same time, you know, I've had to then kind of do the work once they've given us that set of expectations that they've been working to. We've then done our work to make sure that we understand what that looks like from our perspective, and that's why we've got to where we are right now.
One supplementary, Councillor Baker.
Can you see why people might be a little bit frustrated in politics then, when they're being made almost promises, if you like? People will see it that way, and they see it on literature, and they're saying flights off by spring 2026, and then that's no longer the case. So do you think perhaps there's a lesson learnt there in sort of announcing things a bit too early? You know, I'm not saying there's any you know, malpractice going on here or anything like that, or this is, you know, this was done in a bad way. But can you see why people are perhaps feeling a bit let down and a bit frustrated by that messaging, Oliver?
You'll forgive me if I don't take entirely seriously the idea from maybe a member of the party who doesn't necessarily have the most spotless track record when it comes to announcing things that didn't necessarily come to fruition. So I think, you know, there's maybe other areas we could explore about kind of people saying things that then didn't happen. But look, from my perspective, as far as I'm aware, and if you have evidence to the contrary, please tell me, but as far as I'm aware, there was never any literature put out by Ros Jones or anyone else that said flights will take off, passenger flights will take off in spring 2026. My understanding is Ros said, and I have to say I wasn't that closely attached to it, so I'm not entirely sure, and if you want to tell me I'm wrong, please do. I think there was leaflets put out and maybe some social media that said an open airport in 2026 and spring 2026. That is, I believe, still Ros's ambition. We're doing our very best, as you know, to get over the hurdle of funding right now, and I've made clear my own position. We want to do this as swiftly as we can. Things change. These are dynamic projects, and they are absolutely difficult things to get right. You know, we are doing our very best to open it as quickly as possible and to do everything as quickly as possible. I've just been clear, frankly, about offering some clarity on the timeline to commercial passenger flights in 2028.
Thank you. Welcome, Oliver, to the meeting. Look, I hope the airport is a success. I think it's something that we need in South Yorkshire. All credit to your efforts on this. However, our job obviously is to scrutinise all of that and make sure we don't. It doesn't go badly wrong, I suppose. And looking at our history with Peel in particular, the deal seems to be the previous history with Doncaster, also the history with Sheffield Airport. We spend an awful lot of money. Peel walks away with a lot of money, and we don't have an airport. And if that's happened twice, you know, can you assure us that that is not a possibility in the way this is set up this time round? On top of that, I mean, I guess because the amount of money we're putting in is so great, I mean, we really need to be confident this is going to work, and we all want it to work. And we need to be able to project a confidence that it's going to work. We need airlines to commit, don't we? And so, things like targets on numbers of flights and volumes of freight and so on. How confident can we be about that sort of thing? I mean, so to say, for example, I mean, there's a lot of air freight in a lot of airports at the moment because of the position with de minimis shipments coming out of China, Temu and all that. You know, they'll ship direct to you by air freight. if those de minimis rules changes, which they might, and I don't know if you have a conversation with the government about this, because there's a massive loophole at the moment, then that might suddenly cut out a lot of air freight. Now, would that sort of thing hamper, you know, that's just one example, but you know, projecting the confidence, being sure we've got it right, and you know, not being taken for a ride by Peel yet again.
So firstly, genuinely, like, I'm grateful for your positivity about the airport, because I think that's absolutely right. I think it is a big opportunity. I think it is a big challenge as well. But you know, if we get this right, I think the returns to South Yorkshire are significant, not just financial returns, but the returns in all sorts of different ways. The strategic fit with the plans that we have, and you know, I am and have been throughout this, kind of looking at it in the round to try and protect taxpayers' money, whilst at the same time kind of unlock any potential opportunity there. And that's always been the challenge I've been trying to balance. So as much as you are here to hold me to account, I was doing the same thing with that project throughout this process, making sure that we had asked the right questions along the way, which is, as I say, why it's taken the time it has and why we've done that amount of due diligence and scrutiny. You're right to point to the history with Peel, which is why I think we've now approached it in the way that we have. And I have to be fair to Peel. I want to say this, you know, publicly. Peel have been positive in the developments and discussions that we have had with them. They have worked with us collaboratively to be able to get to a place where we were able to sign that deal, because we were confident about the approach that we were taking and the way in which they had engaged. So look, that is not perfect. No deal ever is. You know, clearly there is always going to be compromise on both sides, but I have to sort of say, and I've said what I said about Peel previously, you know, it's a matter of public record where I was when they chose to close the airport down. I was not happy with that decision, but I have to say, as a partner, we need to work with them going forward, because they are the landowner, and we've got to make sure that that relationship works. And so that's the position that I'm in. You asked the direct question, is there no possibility it doesn't work? Of course there isn't. There's always a possibility that projects of this scale and of this size over time don't give you the returns that you hope, and there's all sorts of things out there that we can't imagine right now, which may or may not happen. You know, none of us would have foreseen a pandemic, etc. You know, and we've, I think, now taken account of some of that. But equally, there are always things that you can't foresee that might happen. But that's why we have, in the process we've been through, taken a conservative view of what the estimates look like. So if you go through the paper, and again, you know, the paper is just recently available, so please do have a read. And there are risks highlighted in there. There are things that we've had to try and fix and overcome, and challenges that we've taken on, because, you know, this is a dynamic process, as I was saying earlier to Councillor Bacon. So we are absolutely in the process of trying to get the best possible deal for South Yorkshire, as you would expect. But I can never sit here in good faith and in confidence say to you, there is no chance that this will not work. As I said, and have said recently, you know, I said this yesterday when I made clear my intention in terms of voting, I'm not prepared to take careless risks with taxpayers' money, but I think calculated risks is what people expect me to do. That's what I'm here to do, is try and grow the economy using the funds that we have as the public sector to invest in places and spaces where sometimes the private sector are not prepared to, because either the returns aren't great enough or the returns take too long. And that's where we are with this project, and that's why I think it's important that we've stepped into that space. We've done our homework. There can never be any guarantees in these sorts of spaces, but what we can do is do every piece of work possible to make sure we are reassured to the extent that we can be that we're taking the right decision, and that's, I think, where we've landed.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Can I just ask, in terms of our relationship with the operator that we've engaged to run the airport, to what extent are returns to them dependent on success? To what extent do they engage in the risk in this? Do they have skin in the game sufficiently? I don't know. Maybe you can't talk about that, but I want to know that we're you know, we're not just paying somebody to do something. It doesn't matter if they succeed or not. Is there belief from a commercial operator that they can make this work? That's the critical thing.
Can I separate those two questions out a little bit? So I think there is absolutely belief from Munich that they can make this work. They've been very clear with us about their confidence and their enthusiasm. Do you mind if we write to you with the answer to your first question? Because I don't know what commercially I'm allowed to say or otherwise, and I don't want to spill the beans when I'm not supposed to. But if we write to you and let you know what the answer is to that question, if you don't mind.
That's fair. No, that's completely fair enough. Yeah. I just want to know that they've got skin in the game.
Yeah, sure.
That makes it. That they're not just.
We'll write to you and tell you what
okay.
I think we're able to say.
Can I ask, put your right to all committee members?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. My question's around the infrastructure improvements that are going to maximise the site. And have we got an agreement with our partners, Peel, to put any monies in to improve their facilities? Or is it only going to be public money that's going to build rail or road going in? And how could it impact on maximising our income through business rates because of improvements? Just two tiers to it.
So I think just for clarity, so it won't just be rail or road. We're also looking things like, you know, power, for instance, is a big part of that plan, because clearly if we want to put in more businesses on the site, we're going to need more power into that site, etc., etc. So, you know, there's all sorts of challenges there that we need to overcome. In terms of kind of the agreement with Peel, again, I'm sort of slightly wary of stepping into this space because I'm not sure what is and isn't commercially confidential, but I would say, like, we are absolutely going to have to work with the landowner to make sure that we are able to make improvements to that site. You know, that is clear. We have a responsibility there because, you know, there are things we want to do on that site in order to improve it, not just for the airport, but more broadly, you know, improvements we want to make. And I think that's right, and that the public sector's got to play a role. And it's sort of, there's a question there, isn't there, about sort of how wide do you draw the boundary? So, for instance, if we want to do something at Junction 3, for instance, like, whose responsibility is that? Is it Peel's because it would improve the access to their site, or is it ours because we've got a vested interest there? And these are conversations we're going to have over the next 10, 15, 20 years, and hopefully beyond that as well. But, you know, that is why, in answer to, you know, Councillor Otton's question, I think it's so important that we maintain that positive working relationship with the landowner, because, you know, in this country, it is absolutely right that we do not just take land off people when we don't have any right to it. So we will work with the landowner over their appeal in a proactive and constructive way in order to maximise the value, both for us as the public sector and the communities of Doncaster and South Yorkshire, and for them as well as the landowner.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've come in at the right time. I was just being a briefing for Sheffield leaders on the airport. I am still unconvinced that the risks don't outweigh the you know, the benefits, because the big difference now is this huge investment of public money that we haven't had before. And my kind of question is this a good use of public money, and couldn't we not use, you know, nearly 200 million to invest in other jobs, you know, even in the same area? It doesn't have to be somewhere different. Why are we not investing in sustainable jobs, in training people to do the jobs for the future, rather than investing in something that is going to bring more emissions to South Yorkshire that are in complete contradiction to our you know, statements of intent in terms of making, you know, the region more carbon neutral, etc. The report was only made available this morning. I've been in a long meeting just now, so I've not read it all. It's hundreds of pages, and you know, I know that there's been a lot of work on this, and I can understand how people really wanted to succeed. But for me, I'm still convinced, I'm still dubious that there isn't a positivity bias, because we are so desperate for it to succeed, because it's so important in terms of creation of jobs, etc. But couldn't we invest that same money into something completely different? Because why is it going to work this time when it's not worked before? Because the transport element is key, that investment in infrastructure, and that is not part of the business. I mean, it's mentioned in terms of what's needed, and it's so important. But our competitor, the competitor to this is Manchester, that's got a train link. I mean, I know it is for me personally, because, you know, it would be really handy for me personally to have an airport near. But for the last 10 years, I've used Manchester, because if I want to use the car park is right opposite the terminal. If I want to use the train, I can get on the train. And it's really, you know, people get into habits, because there's a lot of assumption about displacement of people that use other airports to come here. But I'm not convinced yet. But I still need to read the whole report, which I'm hoping to do by Friday.
So there are 1,000 pages in the due diligence. There is 31 pages in the report. So hopefully start with the 31 pages and then see what you might need to do with the 1,000 pages. I appreciate that's a lot of work to get through. There was a lot in there, so forgive me if shout if I don't answer any of your questions. just to take those maybe in reverse order. So you asked, why do we think it might work this time when it's not worked before? I think there's a number of reasons for that. You know, I've made this analogy before, so forgive me, but you know, on a football perspective, from a football perspective, why do some football teams drop down the leagues, get a new manager, and then go back up the league? Well, it's because sometimes just better management gives you a better result, and I would like to think that we will be taking a sort of better approach to managing the airport. In terms of kind of our metrics, though, you know, Peel, not unreasonably, as a commercial operator, had a specific set of metrics against which they had to sort of govern their decision, chiefly profit, but also passenger numbers. These are not my two metrics of success. My metrics of success are different, quite rightly, I think. As the public sector, we have to look at a broader range of metrics, not least our contribution to the broader economy of South Yorkshire, the strategic fit with the rest of South Yorkshire, and a longer term view about what that means as well. So quite honestly, you know, I am not interested in projects which return high profits in short time, because that's where the private sector is supposed to be. We're supposed to be in a different place, and that's what I think this project is all about. So it's about taking a longer term view, and it's about taking a more holistic view about what opportunity means to South Yorkshire and creating opportunities for kids, young people, people who want to be in those industries of the future, and that's why it's a different set of metrics for us. So success is, I think, an interesting word. So why has it worked or not worked? Why would it be successful this time and not before? I think it depends on, you know, what you're looking at when it comes to success to a certain extent. In terms of competitor airports, just to be clear, we don't think Manchester is our competitor. We think other airports, like for instance Teesside to a certain extent, albeit about a quarter of the size, East Midlands, Leeds, they are in the long term probably kind of more of our sort of competitor market. In terms of that positivity bias, and it's a fair question because there is a lot of positivity towards the airport, certainly in Doncaster, you know, they're very positive about that. As a council, they've always been very positive about the airport, but I think that's where this mayoral system and the devolved system, the MCA system, comes into its own actually, is because there has been some friction there. I don't think that's been a secret. You know, we've kind of had to do that due diligence, and that to a certain extent has frustrated some colleagues because we've had to take some time in order to look at that and do the work that we think is required to invest the money of the MCA. And that has been done in, I think, the right way. You know, I was saying last week at the race course, you know, to a business audience from Doncaster, I can't commit. You know, this time last week, I was in a place where I was saying I wasn't sure that we were going to be able to move ahead. And it has literally been down to the wire in terms of getting all the deal right and making sure that we were doing the due diligence properly. So, you know, we've always been taking an appropriately sceptical approach to doing that work because I think that's what people would expect. And I'd like to think we've done a good job, I hope, of balancing those risks to the taxpayer and making sure that we are taking an appropriate look at the finances and the governance. It's why, and you know, go back to Councillor Otton's question, why we have taken a conservative estimate of the passenger numbers and the figures. So when you look at the report, what you'll see is it says quite clearly the numbers we are basing our estimates on are lower than the recent estimates, either for national figures or for Doncaster's growth in terms of passenger numbers. So when we say there's a high case and a low case, we're basing those on lower than the estimates that were from, well, the actual kind of rising passenger numbers in the past. So look, no forecast is ever perfect, is it? But you know, I think we've taken an appropriately conservative view of what those passenger numbers look like. In terms of sustainability, look, I've said a number of times, and you and I are probably going to disagree on this, but I think, you know, we're always going to fly into the future. You've said yourself, you know, you fly, I fly. I recognise the challenges of climate breakdown. Of course I do. I'm not sceptical in that sense in any way, shape or form. But I also know that we're going to be flying in 20 years' time, and I imagine you will be, and I hope I will be as well. And if we're going to be flying in 20 years' time, then we need to have better solutions to flight. And I think South Yorkshire can be part of those better solutions to flight. And that's why I think this is one of the things that we need to do at the airport, is like really focus on sustainable aviation. And then my last point would simply be that, you know, I've heard calls for the Gateway site to become housing or to be used for a different purpose, be it, you know, jobs in other sectors, whatever else. The brutal truth is, in these sorts of areas, there are no businesses coming forward to us and saying, actually, you know what, we want to set up a massive factory in Doncaster based on low carbon transport. We want to build an EV battery factory, for instance. These people are not coming forward to work with us in South Yorkshire on those big sites. We've got big sites in Doncaster and elsewhere in South Yorkshire that we're not managing to get away. So it's not just simply that, you know, I get to choose that South Yorkshire is in this sector or that sector, or we have the opportunity just to go and build a factory on in the areas of the industry that I like or I think are morally better. I don't get that choice, right? I wish I did, because I would make, you know, a set of choices clearly. But this is an opportunity in front of us, and it is a unique opportunity. The scale of it, the breadth of that opportunity in South Yorkshire is unique. It genuinely is unique, and that's why ultimately I've gone for this decision. For me personally to back it, I can't speak for the other leaders, and you've had the conversation with Tom today, but that's why I'm backing the airport, because I think this is a unique opportunity, and I'm determined to try and grow a bigger and better economy in South Yorkshire.
Thanks, Oliver. I want to say that I'm very supportive of the airport because there isn't, economically, there isn't a successful region in the world that doesn't have an airport. That's fact. And it does act as an economic catalyst. Unfortunately, Angela had to go to that meeting when we had the presentation from Steve Hout about jobs and skills, which was really interesting and focusing on resources to get people into jobs. My question is, it's not just the airport, is it? It's South Yorkshire Airport City. And I want to know what, I think I've asked you this before, but we're in a different place. How it does the industrial element of it stack up without the airport? It seems to be you saying no, because people aren't coming forward. And how dependent are likely investors on that whole site reliant on us getting the airport? Because, you know, to come back to what Angela said, that's jobs. It's also around sustainable fuel for, you know, cleaner ways of flying, which I'm really interested in, because I will keep on flying, but I would like it to be more sustainable. So if you could just talk to me about the industrial element rather than the flights.
So just for clarity, so people around the table understand, for people who haven't had a chance to look at the report, essentially we're putting funding into the South Yorkshire Airport City concept, which is both the airport at the heart of it, which is the SA, and then the wider Gateway East site, which is the biggest commissioned site in the UK, and with an ambition to both let that both become housing, so there will be a housing element on there, and then also the industrial site that you mentioned, which is about sustainable aviation and advanced manufacturing in particular. That's the ambition. And we've done market testing now to make sure that we are understanding what the market's appetite is for that site, and our understanding is there is a significant market appetite for that site. So we've done that work. That was one of the pieces of work that we've done over the last few months. Thank you. That we've done over the last few months to understand the challenge and the opportunity. So I want to be clear about what I'm saying. So there would be an opportunity, for instance, to be able to, let's say, for instance, the site gets bulldozed and it is just a flat piece of land. There would be an opportunity potentially to put warehousing on there, right? Because actually there is an appetite for more warehousing in South Yorkshire, right? So, and that might return more, just in pure GVA terms, it might return more to the economy of South Yorkshire if we just had, in the short term at the very least, it might just return more, because warehousing is not very expensive to put up, and the jobs are relatively well paid, and there is an appetite for it. I don't think that's the future for South Yorkshire in the long term, and I think most people around the table would probably agree with that. And therefore, actually, the best opportunity for us as a strategic fit, not just in terms of pure GVA or BCR terms, is, I think, to go down the road we are going down, which is to say, right, advanced manufacturing, we've got a unique strengths in South Yorkshire on advanced manufacturing, you know, witness what's going on in Rotherham, you know, brilliant 64% productivity growth over the last 20 years in Rotherham as a result of advanced manufacturing. On sustainable aviation, because of the work going on at the University of Sheffield, not just when it comes to SAF, but when it comes to lightweighting, as evidenced by the Compass facility, Boeing's only manufacturing facility as well in Europe at the Advanced Manufacturing Park. Again, good evidence of that. And so all of that stacks up. What we haven't done in the paper, as you will see, is say that the airport itself is only viable if we use the stuff around it to pay for the bit in the middle. We haven't said that. We've kept the two things separate. So actually, we're taking, again, quite a conservative view, because there is business rate retention on the site because of the investment zone. So we do get to keep some of that money in South Yorkshire. Both Doncaster and the MCA get to keep a split of that money. But we haven't said, and that's how we're paying for the airport. Now, what we want to do is make sure that actually we can reinvest. So I think over time, that's exactly where we would like to go, because I think that makes sense. But actually, we haven't taken that view. We've said, look, to go back to the earlier question, here's the envelope of money. That's the ceiling on the envelope. Work on that basis. Now, over time, we'd like the site to get away, and then there's a way of maybe sort of bringing more funds in. But we're taking a different approach because we are taking that conservative view of how we want to fund the airport and not just writing that essentially blank cheque.
I'm pleased that you've renegotiated the lease with Peel, because that was a major risk factor that we've managed. I'm pleased about that. The other thing I mentioned earlier when we had the transport presentation was about access to the airport, whether that's by extending tram train or whatever. So I haven't read the report in detail. I won't yet. So is that included in there? That's something that I'm really keen that we look at. I'll leave it at that.
So yeah, if you look at the report, there's a surface access strategy document in there. I can't remember what the appendix number is, but have a look at that report, and that explains what those opportunities look like. Back to the earlier question, we do want to be able to increase opportunities to get there easily. You know, not least, I'd love the tram to go out to the airport, I'll be honest. You know, that would seem like a great opportunity. Then you can go from DSA rather than Manchester, so I'd really love that. And you know, that's got to be a longer term aspiration, because that's not going to go in tomorrow. But you know, tram train gives us that opportunity. It can be connected to the East Coast Main Line. There's the Lincoln Line at the end of the runway, as well as once we get bus franchising underway, you know, our opportunities to design a network, which frankly we failed with when we did Waverley, and you know that it didn't ever get, you know, we didn't sort that out at the time, did we? And I think we're quite clear in the document that that's got to be something we do in future. So look, that's all in there. It's in the surface access strategy, and obviously happy to answer questions about it going forward as well.
So Bacon, you've got 30 seconds to ask your question, then Councillor, and then Mayor's got 2 minutes to answer it.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to just come back to you, Oliver, on the commitment there. I've just watched a lovely video on Facebook. I'd highly recommend you watch it, and it's very pristine, very well produced, and in it, Mayor Ross Jones does say that she'll see flights going off in spring 2026. So, you know, again, the question is, you know, do you think that was the right thing to do to say that?
I think Ros Jones has been ambitious for the airport from the start, and I think she's articulated her ambitions for the airport every step of the way. Her kind of driving ambition has been to get the airport away as quickly as humanly possible. I can't speak for everything Ros has said throughout the campaign or anywhere else, but look, I've been clear about what the comprehensive timeline looks like. I think it's likely that there will be flights next year, because actually there's all sorts. Yeah, exactly. There's all sorts of flights that will be happening from the airport. But I've been clear about what that comprehensive overarching timetable looks like in terms of getting to that fully operational airport. Yeah, couldn't have been clearer than that.
We've got time to take one more question, yes, Oliver. Please. Last question, make it short.
Sorry. I have it, sorry, I've got it written down because it's about the nature recovery plan. For which the SIMCA has a statutory role, but it's really delayed. Are there any news about that, and how soon can we see any progress?
So I've been doing public. Well, I say public. I went and did met a group of farmers out in Stannington, which is brilliant actually, and been out and met other people besides. So you know, I've been going out and meeting people. I can't off the top of my head give you a timetable, but if you don't mind us writing to you about what is happening with the local nature recovery strategy. Yeah, of course, yeah, happy to do that.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor Coppard, for answering those questions. Have a nice day. That fetches me to the end of my agenda, and thank you very much. I close the meeting.